Sit down and we want you for the next, let's say, 20 minutes, shall we, as we have this amazing conversation. The much-awaited first memoir by former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, My Own Liberator, comes out this week. The foreword is written by our former President Thabo Mbeki, who appointed him to the High Court in 2001 and then Deputy Chief in 2005. My Own Liberator is on a personal journey, and the follow-up book will be a judicial memoir focusing on his 15 years as judge of the Constitutional Court and some of the cases he presided over. We're truly honored to have him here for one of our, of course, segments that we're proud to have. And of course, this is one of his first interviews as well about the book. It's so good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Leanne, thank you. Good morning.
So I believe you're
good to be here.
I believe you're having about 5 different launches for this book. One, of course, was last night. So we're grateful that we've got you in so bright and early. How's it going so far?
Leanne, it's been wonderful. I mean, many of your colleagues have been reading the book, and they'll be in conversation with me as you are, and they seem to think maybe I don't come through as the judge sitting on an ivory tower trying to make orders, but it's really a story of a journey, of a life's journey. And along the way, I talk about all the props, all the crutches, all the support in the form of people that you find, and inevitably, then the events around it. So in many ways, it's also a history of our struggle, a history of our transition, all wrapped up around the personal journey.
Yeah, I want to delve a little bit into this personal journey because it's one of the most incredible journeys, and perhaps not a lot of people know the man behind the robe, and it's almost like you're opening it up and letting us see all the way back to how you became who you are today. And it's quite incredible looking at you, knowing what you've been through and understanding the person that you are. So when we look back and we go to the very, very young age of 15 years old, I'm going to ask you what it was like growing up. I mean, what drove you? You were the youngest prisoner ever to go on to Robben Island. I mean, 15 years old, many are just kicking stones in the streets and worrying about very frivolous things, but you were fighting for the freedom of our country at that age already. Talk to us about your childhood.
Yes, Leanne, I had a mother and a father who were both teachers, and with working class backgrounds of their parents, obviously. And they were like the first in their generation sort of to rear their heads, and they were determined to bring us up, and we were 4 boys. But it was just irritating when I grew up. From the age of 12, I could see the sharp difference between where I lived and the other end of Pretoria.
Yeah.
I'm an Attridgeville boy, and I come from there. In fact, one of the launches will be in Attridgeville on Saturday. In my home village, I can't wait to have a book launch right there. But it was quite disturbing to see this sharp difference in circumstances. I could see the playing fields there were greener, they were lawned. I could see ours, was dusty and terrible. I could see the schools were different. And the circumstances in Attridgeville and in the city of Pretoria were sharply different. And the penny just dropped. But why this difference? Because essentially, my innocent childhood sense of justice told me something wrong.
Yeah.
And I began to listen, to read about people being people, like human beings. And the differences external are superficial. And tagged on to that notion, of course, my parents brought us with dignity, with a sense of great self-worth and self-respect, hard work and honesty. All of those things fed into hatred for apartheid. I thought, I'm not going to die a slave. I'm not going to die oppressed. So and then grew the idea, my boy, you've got to do something. You've got to liberate yourself.
Yeah. So this led to your arrest. The day that you were arrested, when the police came and took you into jail at that time, what was it like? I mean, what was going through your young mind?
Yeah, you remember I described it in some detail in the book. It was a very emotional moment and coincided with the 21st of March. That's the day they chose to to arrest us, and we're many. Don't have the impression I was a single solo.
Yeah.
We were a group of students. We were all in uprising, and we had all decided we should help destroy apartheid. 15 cops kicked the doors and the windows, covered every possible exit, and they were in no time they were inside the house. You're under arrest. They had machine guns and they had everything you can imagine. Out into the van, blue lights, and they sped off.
Yeah.
And that, of course, followed 90 days detention in solitary confinement. You're suddenly cut off from your mother and father, and you're all by yourself. So too the rest of my other young comrades. So, it must always be understood it was a collective.
And you always speak about the fact that you were so grateful that you were together.
Yeah.
I think there was one part in the book, and you talk about the fact that times are tough, but it's so good to have somebody with you to walk into the sunset with, because you felt like you weren't going through it alone. So there were people with you. You were together with a lot of other people.
Absolutely. Particularly when we were charged, we were all brought together, kept in the same place, and that sense of solidarity returned. When I was alone, I cried most of the time. In a dark cell, tortured, questioned, interrogated, alone. But once we regrouped, it became wonderful. And once we went to Robben Island, even bigger, because we became thousands and thousands of prisoners who came from the African National Congress, from the Pan-Africanist Congress, from the Black Consciousness Movement, from the Unity Movement, South African Communist Party. So suddenly, there was a group of people who were determined to change society and were protective of us, particularly we, the young ones.
You know what I enjoyed as well in your book, and I think what was quite interesting to realize that before you went into jail, you into prison, I think you had this idea of going into medicine. But once you were in there, and I was wondering if this was the turning point for you, because you describe being beaten up, you describe being thrown onto a floor for a half an hour, being kicked and punched and couldn't see through your eyes. The next day, the same thing happened. You were made to run on the same spot, singing and Nkosi Sikelele, dropping to the floor and then being kicked for another half an hour. And you never knew your rights.
My goodness, you read those details, Leanne. Thank you.
You didn't know if you were able to ask for clean clothes. You didn't know if you could ask for medical help. You didn't know anything. You did not know your rights. Was that the point you realized that you needed to study law, that you needed to protect people?
Oh, yes, that absolutely, and immediately followed up by the trial, which ultimately, in the end, we ended up defending ourselves because the judge wouldn't grant a postponement and all the advocates withdrew. So that set the scene and changed my course. When you're young, you're bright, you're cracking your maths and science, you think, I'm going to become a doctor. It was the most independent and free thing that you could be if you're black at the time, indeed if you're any other color. So that changed the course, yes. Yeah. And I thought, no, lawyer.
Yeah, not a politician, but a liberator. That's how you've described yourself.
Not a politician, but a liberator.
I like that. I do like that very much, and your life would follow suit. You then, of course, went to Robben Island, and you stayed there, the youngest prisoner to have set foot on Robben Island at that time. It's so interesting to read of your experiences, particularly when it came to education, because that was your way to free yourself, to free your mind, and to study. It was always welcomed. Studying was welcomed.
Leanne, when you're down and out and you're sitting and you have 10 years ahead of you, what do? You have to survive, because the material conditions in prison are horrible. All decisions are made for you. When to wake up, what to wear, when to shower, when to eat, all of those. But once you needed an escape route. And for me, the obvious thing was to continue studying. So I put my head down, agitated, to be allowed to study, and all of us were allowed to study. And suddenly, there was a clear course. Junior certificate, matric, registered with UNISA, passed a degree and another degree, started the third one, 10 years was gone.
Wow.
Through the window. And survived the rigor and the hatred of imprisonment.
Yeah. Let's take a break here on the program. When we return, there's so much more to talk about. And I want to talk about your love life. I want to talk about your wife. I want to talk about your children. And I also want to talk about your mother and what it was like seeing her when she'd come visit you. Because she spoke about what it was like visiting you, but what was it like for you? Stay tuned.
Thank you.